We're now going to move to look at worldviews. A worldview is like a lens over your eyes which forms a view of the world and for the world. It's made up of ideas with conscious and unconscious elements. Every single person has a worldview, whether they're aware of it or not. Ravi has developed an innovative system called the 3-4-5 grid to analyze different worldviews. Worldviews must face 3 tests for truth, 4 kinds of questions: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny, and speak to 5 major disciplines: theology, metaphysics, anthropology, ethics, and epistemology. This gives us a way of asking key questions so that we can bring our own beliefs and ideas to land on something concrete and authentic.
Welcome to this session, which is more uninspiringly called the 3-4-5 grid. As I was preparing this, I was thinking of my good friend, the comedian Jeff Foxworthy. And for those of you who are from out of country or not familiar with his brand of humor, Jeff is one of the biggest selling comedians, a very fine follower of Jesus himself. But he tells this joke about what the fans of car racing, how they count to 10. That's his way of introducing the joke, and it goes like this. He said, any car racing fan, if you ask them how to count to 10, they'll say 1, 2, Dale Earnhardt, 4, 5, and move on. You get the joke. Dale Earnhardt, in his heyday, long gone now, used to drive car number 3. And so for those of you who are listening to this, listening to a 3-4-5 grid, at the end of it, you'll wonder if this is just an exercise in mathematics. It really isn't. In fact, technically speaking, if I were to go through this lecture, it'll be called the 2-3-4-5-6 grid, and you'll see why exactly I say that. But bear in mind that when I deal with subjects like this, or when any one of us is speaking on a subject such as this, shrinking it down to the time on hand, oftentimes is just distilled from a lot of other material. Some of the material I'm bringing to you oftentimes is distilled from about 30 hours of lectures given in some institution over a period of time and so forth. And so I take the most salient points from those lectures and bring them to you. So we talk about this as a 3-4-5 grid, but I'll go a little one number on each side, 2 and 6, and you'll get the point as we move forward. You know, it is often mentioned that truth is something that is at once often most desired in a situation, but least really appreciated. Truth is the most desired, but the least appreciated. Many years ago, I was visiting in England, my wife and my children and I was visiting the famous court of law, the Old Bailey. I'll never forget that experience because you go up into the upper level and you can walk around and go in from room to room and see which case you really want to sit down at and experience and test it out. And we walked into one totally unaware of what the matter was under discussion. And in this instance, it was 2 young minor girls who were accusing an older man of having raped them. It was a very sobering trial. And of course, the girls being minor, they were not allowed to be brought into the courtroom. The only ones who could see their faces were the lawyers or the prosecuting attorney, and even they were looking at them in a screen while the girls were secluded in another setting. All we could hear was their voices. And I recall the man bringing about the charges, the man defending the accused, how he began his talk. He looked at the 2 girls' faces on the screen and he said to them, I want you to know something. I'm not here to intimidate you. I'm not here to scare you. I'm not here to make it difficult for you. I just want to know one thing. And we are all interested in one thing here. If you'll just hear me carefully, he said, all we want is the truth. That's all we want. If you're terrified by a question I ask or you're nervous, you can stop, you can pause. And I remember him saying as he was bringing his talk to a close, all I want from you is the truth. Natan Sharansky, the one-time justice minister in the former Soviet Union, who had been kept in solitary confinement for his political views over many years, when he was finally released and then left the country, came back with his wife. And he asked if he could go to the prison where he had been kept for all those terrifying years in darkness. And when he came to that cell, as he was about to enter, he put his arm out and blocked his wife from coming. He said, "Can I go in there alone for a moment, please? Because this is where I really found out about myself." And he went in and they shut the door on him. This time, of course, knowing he had imprisoned himself just for a few minutes, but he wanted this time alone of reflection. And when he came out of there, he went to the grave of Andrei Sakharov, the famed physicist. And he went and laid a wreath at Sakharov's grave. And when he came back from there, the reporters were waiting for him. And here's what he said. He said, "Andrei Sakharov, who gave to us the atomic bomb to defend ourselves, made this comment. He said, 'I've come to the conclusion as I near the end of my life that the most powerful weapon in the world is not the bomb. The most powerful weapon in the world is not the atomic bomb. The most powerful weapon in the world is the truth. The most powerful weapon in the world is the truth.'" And putting a different twist on it, it was Winston Churchill talking about military warfare and all the shenanigans that go on and all the intelligence that goes on behind the scenes. He put it in these words: "The most valuable thing in the world is the truth." So Sakharov talking about it as the most powerful, Churchill talking about it as the most valuable. Then he says this: "It is so valuable that oftentimes it is hidden or protected by a bodyguard of lies." The most valuable thing in the world is the truth. The most powerful thing in the world is the truth. All I want from you in this court of law is the truth. And do you remember that conversation between Jesus and Pontius Pilate narrated in John chapter 18? It's a powerful conversation of what's really going on there. Pilate sends for Jesus, and he really doesn't want to deal with this because it's politically charged. And as he looks at Jesus, he says to him, are you the king of Israel? Are you the king? And Jesus, in the first instance, reacts as any good apologist would. Jesus looks at him and he says this: "Are you asking of this on your own, or has somebody set you up for this?" Do you see what Jesus is doing? Intent is prior to content. He was basically asking Pilate, do you really want the truth, or are you just framing this? So he says, are you asking this on your own, or has somebody else set you up for this? Pilate is irate. He said, look, I didn't bring you here. It's your people that brought you here. And Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my people would fight to protect my arrest, but my kingdom is from another place. Pilate then says, you are a king then. And that's when Jesus responds with these words: "You are right in saying I'm a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. For this reason I came into the world, to testify to the truth, and everyone on the side of truth listens to me." This extraordinary answer not only positions what his mission is about, but how our intentions are revealed when we listen to his teaching. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. Truth the most valuable, truth the most powerful, oftentimes hidden and protected by a bodyguard of lies. Life then consists of discovering the truth and being protected from the seduction of lies. This is where in my apologetic over the years, I have gone for this 3-4-5 grid. But before I get to the 3, let me look at the 2. Broadly speaking, when philosophers or ethicists talk about truth, they funnel it all down to 2 basic ideas. They call it the correspondence theory of truth and the coherence theory of truth. Those 2 broad categories. They're actually self-evident in what they mean. But correspondence basically means this: when statements are made about particular issues or events, that what you are asserting corresponds to what actually is. So the truth is being given to you in the correspondence of the facts as they are, in the way they have been propositionally given. That's the correspondence theory of truth. But in a court of law, you don't just go for the correspondence theory. Ultimately, you have to bring in the coherence theory. What is the coherence theory? The coherence theory basically asserts that when all the corresponding facts asserted are put together into a narrative, there is a coherence to it. It all comes together, and that's why lawyers will oftentimes try to poke holes into a witness's statements, because they want to see whether statement A really comports with statement B, or whether something is clearly in contradiction and the story doesn't fit together. Correspondence and coherence are the two basic approaches in which we come to a narrative or to claims. But this way it gets a little more finely tuned. And we move to the three-pointer here. How do we know whether a worldview is really true in correspondence and coherence? And here we come to the threefold grid here. Logical consistency, empirical adequacy, and experiential relevance. Logical consistency, empirical adequacy, and experiential relevance. What do they mean? What they mean is when you're making a claim to a worldview and all of its facts and so on, that it is logically consistent. It is not coming to you as something irrational or totally unsupportable. How do you know whether it is unsupportable or not? Now you go to empirical adequacy. Is there a way to empirically verify these facts? Let me give you a hint here. For example, if Jesus were not going to give us empirical adequacy in his claims, you know what he would have said about the resurrection? He would have said, I'm going to rise again spiritually, and I want you to know that even though you put my body into the ground, spiritually I'll rise again, and you will not be able to hold the real me inside the grave or inside the tomb. But he gave such an empirically demonstrable claim that I will bodily rise again. That empirical fact became very important after the resurrection was claimed by the disciples. So logical consistency, empirical adequacy. Let me make one more pause here. The worldview of the sciences that so single-handedly wants to go in favor of the empirical ways of measuring truth, they often, in grabbing the finger of one method of truth testing, think they have grabbed the entire fist of reality. Yes, the empirical measurement ought to be there, but there is so much more to life than just the empirical measurement in a lab or a litmus test of one sort or the other. But I won't pause any longer in that. We'll get to some of these issues as the course unfolds. Logically consistent, empirically adequate, and experientially relevant. If the claims of the Christian faith are so profound and all-encompassing, then there should really be an existential or an experiential relevance to it all. How does it really meet me where I am in my day-to-day life, my moral choices, my handling of temptation, how I deal with my finances, how I deal with other people, how I construct my private life, my character? All of this brings in an experiential relevance to my faith. So you move from the correspondence theory and the coherence theory to logical consistency, empirical adequacy, and experiential relevance. Now this brings us to the core of what it is we are actually defending. This is where we come to the four. The four questions of life I put together years ago in developing my apologetic. As I took scores of questions from all kinds of cultures, they really boil down to four broad categories: origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. Where do I come from? What does life really mean? How do I differentiate between good and evil? What happens to a human being when he or she dies? Most questions that are raised fit into one of these four. Now, there are footnotes and subtitles and all of that, but when you're examining a worldview or critiquing it, these are really the issues that are either attacked or defended. Now, going to the question of origin, isn't this where naturalism is so clearly separated from a theistic framework? The naturalistic worldview says time plus matter plus chance, with no design or prevision in mind, with the random collocation of atoms over millions of years or billions of years, the Earth comes into being, and then humanity ultimately evolves into the state we are. There was really no plan in mind. There was no destiny in mind. It just happened to come together because there was no will involved in the origin. And so that's where naturalism or materialism starts. From the theistic framework, we don't look at it that way. We are the expressed will of a person. He is the first cause. There is a design. There is a purpose. That's where everything becomes defined as you analyze one point over against another. But let me go back to origin. We think of it in the particularities of the scientific world. In the Eastern mind, they come to it from different spokes into the hub. John chapter 1 brilliantly goes through a discourse. In the beginning was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth. In the beginning, God created the heavens of the earth in Genesis. Now we come to the whole Gospel of John, where he talks about how God was in the beginning and the whole revelation of the Son and the incarnation and so on. So here we have it, origin. Remember the fascinating story of how this all came to be? You see, right in the beginning, as you start off the conversation, you've got Andrew coming to talk to Jesus because Andrew sees John the Baptist just identifying Jesus as the Lamb of God and as the Messiah. So Andrew goes to Jesus, and what's his first question? Where do you live? You'd think of so many questions that he could have asked. What's your street address? Jesus says, come. Andrew spends the day with Jesus and goes back and tells Peter, you better come, because I think I've identified who the Messiah is. The next day enters Philip. All these three boys are from Bethsaida. Philip comes and takes a look at what these two men are claiming. He goes and looks for Nathanael. And he brings Nathanael and says, Moses talked about this person, and I think we've found him, Jesus of Nazareth. And Nathanael's comment, the sarcastic one, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Jesus sees Nathanael coming and he says, there's a true Israelite in whom there's really no guile, no sense of duplicity. Nathanael says, how do you know me? He says, before Philip called you, I saw you standing under the fig tree. We're not told the entire conversation, but evidently Nathanael was so overcome by Jesus' ability to describe what was inside him and how he thought and what kind of a person he was. He says, Rabbi, you are truly the Son of God. Jesus says, all I've told you is that I saw you under the fig tree before and identified how you think and who you are, and you've just been overwhelmed by it. I'm going to show you a lot more. You're going to see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man, for that's the very gateway to heaven, as it were. Harking back to Jacob's dream, seeing the ladder going up to heaven, and the angels ascending and descending on the very Son of Man, or now as we see it, the very Son of God. That's where I'm from. I'm from heaven. Now that is the origin of our definition for life. We are created by God, which means the implications are sacred. Origin. Number two, we come to meaning. What is life's purpose? What does it really mean? I jokingly said to my wife not too long ago while I was just looking out of the window and seeing people walking their dogs early at dawn and throwing the ball, and the dog goes, gets the ball, and comes back 6:15 a.m. This is the routine for the dog. The dog gets his workout, very happy, and they go back to their homes. I said, sometimes you get the feeling that we get up at 6 in the morning, we go to work, and that's the ball being thrown. We come back home at the end of the day. We've done our go and fetch the ball for just 8 hours. The dog did it for just 15 minutes. I said, sarcastically, that's what life can be reduced to. Well, that's what the myth of Sisyphus is all about. Rolling the rock up the hill and watching it come down again and again and again. Repetitive movement. Same idea that Solomon ultimately came to and said, this is life. I have experienced it in varieties. I've experienced it in so many ways. And at the end of it, I say, what is it all about? Here's a clue. Please listen. Meaninglessness does not come from being weary of pain. Meaninglessness, for many, has come from becoming weary of pleasure. Which means both pain and pleasure have to be contextualized into something larger if life is to really provide meaning. I speak on that subject in different ways, and my book, Recapture the Wonder, gets into the heart of this question. Origin, meaning, and then we come to morality. How do we differentiate between good and evil? How do we decide what is good for me and what is destructive for me? And here I think the laws of God are so profound. When you take the Ten Commandments or take them through the entire scriptures and the hundreds of manifestations or whatever, the moral law boils down to one question: is life sacred? Is life at its core sacred? Which means preserved and protected by boundaries that are essential to fulfill life's purpose. G.K. Chesterton said, whenever you take a fence down, always pause long enough to ask, why was this fence put there in the first place? You know, we are living in a world of relativism, constantly pushing back the fences. Even as I'm speaking to you in this lecture, just a few hours ago, a father wrote to me about his son who is so frustrated in the university because he knows of all the cheating that is going on around him with his friends. And he comes back home and he says, Dad, this is not fair. We can't really go on an equal footing. I know what's going on, and tears in his eyes that he feels he can't play on a level playing field. Is there a payday someday? Is there a catch-up for all of this? Is life at its core sacred? Are there boundaries for marital fidelity? Are there boundaries for my behavior in this mortal frame? Are there boundaries for me when I speak or talk or fill out my forms or do my taxes? Is life at its core sacred? And so meaning cannot be decided or defined apart from the sanctity of life. Origin, meaning, morality, and ultimately we come to destiny. What happens to a human being when he or she dies? That is the keyhole through which we look at time. It is the keyhole of eternity. So we've taken the coherence and correspondence theories, logical consistency, empirical adequacy, experiential relevance, origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. This now brings me to the 5 components that are really important in pulling this all together. What makes this so difficult? Let me put it to you in these words. There are 5 disciplines that need to be brought together. You're studying God, which means it's theology. Dealing with reality, which means it's metaphysics. You have to deal with knowledge, which is epistemology. How do I know something to be true? You're dealing with morality, which means you have to understand ethics. You're dealing with humankind, which is anthropology. So you're dealing God, reality, knowledge, morality, humankind. And that brings the 5 disciplines together. Or you may be talking about 5 sources of credibility. Number 1, the pragmatic basis for truth. The experiential basis for truth, number 2. The cosmic or metaphysical basis, number 3. The historical basis, number 4. The community basis, number 5. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what the Christian worldview is so strong about. It pulls together the convergence of disciplines, all the way from theology and metaphysics to epistemology and morality and anthropology. All of these address the issue. That's how truth is ultimately discovered. You can't just take one discipline and say we've got it all covered. This is the mistake sometimes even scientists like Stephen Hawking make. Philosophy is dead, says he. That's why the theologian didn't have to come and battle his latest book. The philosophers at Cambridge rose up against him and said, what on earth are you talking about? You've not kept up with philosophy, said the chairman of the Department of Philosophy at Cambridge. Now we can go to constructing a worldview. There are 6 components to this. Let me just give you the 6. Strong in correspondence to have a worldview. Your system has to correspond to truth. High degree of coherence. There has to be coherence to it. There must be an explanatory power to what you have. The avoidance of 2 extremes, too simple or too complex. More than one line of evidence, not just one argument, but many. Able to refute contrary worldviews. You're able to deal with counter perspectives and counter worldviews. Those 6 come together to defend your worldview. Now you can go back to the Old Bailey and find out why truth is so important. The reason it is important is the most valuable thing in the world. It's most powerful. And Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. He also said, I'm come that you might have life and have it more abundantly. The Christian worldview is worth defending to give people the abundant life. God bless you. 2 to 6, hopefully you can get that which is important for you as you work through the defense of the Christian worldview. Thank you.